Hello, my name's Gavin, and this is Genre Books, and today I'm talking about John W. Campbell Jr., but I'm talking about John Campbell, the writer. If you're reading science fiction, especially if you're looking at Golden Age science fiction, vintage science fiction, you can't avoid John Campbell. But that is in his role as editor of Astounding Science Fiction, later Analog. He gives breaks, perhaps not the first break, but the big break to the big three: Heinlein, Asimov, Clarke. Also Theodore Sturgeon, also Lester Del Rey. He's an editor with a very fixed idea of what he wants from the submissions. Although he's not averse to working with writers to tease out their ideas and mould them a little more to what he thinks they should be, and sometimes this is to the story's benefit. He has initially a great belief in the science side of science fiction, and much of what I've read that he wrote proves that he practiced what he preached. Later in his editing career, he buys into an expanded definition of science, let's be generous and call it that, by embracing pseudoscience in the form of Dianetics, psi powers, and the psi boom comes a lot from Campbell's change of tack, and you will find in the 1950s a change to what is being published in the magazines that he edits. But I don't want to talk about Campbell as editor. I don't really want to talk about Campbell as a man either. I think if I can continue this channel, at some point I am going to address Campbell more generally. He's such a big figure in the field, I don't see how it could be avoided. But for today, I just want to concentrate on the writing. And that's difficult because, with a couple of exceptions, there's not a lot positive that I have to say. And that's a shame. I want to be able to enjoy his work more than I actually do. And I will get to some bits that I do enjoy, but let's get, what I see as the negatives out of the way first. I think to reduce my wish for his writing to its barest components is that I would like, in my science fiction, a bit more fiction and a bit less science. I saw a recent video from Roy Reads Anything where he is talking about E. Doc Smith's The Skylark of Space, which coincidentally is also a book I read last week for the first week of Rocket Summer. And I'll be talking about Doc Smith hopefully later this month, because I'm trying to read all of the Skylark books which end in the 1960s. But he made some points which I agree with, and I mention this because John Campbell seems to draw quite a lot of inspiration from E. Doc Smith and falls into many of the traps that Smith does, and I think he also suffers by comparison to Smith. Campbell had a number of stories in Amazing Stories printed in the 1930s, and these were brought together as the book, which I think wasn't released until 1953, called The Black Star Passes. And this is the first of 3 novels with his triumvirate of heroes, Arcot, Maury and Wade. These are very much in the Doc Smith mould. These are archetypal heroes of super science. And this is not a character archetype which produces much engaging fiction. Not to say that it can't, but that it has to be treated in a balanced way, and I don't think Campbell pulls this off. They are hyper-competent individuals, which means that there really isn't any issue that they can't overcome, and overcome very quickly. It also means that by and large they are interchangeable. They are so good at coming up with the solutions. You're reading it and you're wondering who has come up with this latest solution, because this happens every few pages. And the trouble with all three characters being such hyper competent problem solvers is that you have an absolute overload of the technical explanations of how they're going to fix a problem, at the expense of the narrative, where having an obstacle and overcoming it can be a positive for the story. Here it's just an academic problem which requires a solution. Very little peril, very little at stake, let's put it that way. Even when the stakes in this book are absolutely very high, there's no way of conveying that, because we are in absolutely no doubt that this is an issue that is going to be solved rapidly. Campbell at this point is still a science fiction fan. This is early in his career, so I'm going to try to be charitable and view it from that perspective. And as a science fiction fan, and a science fiction fan who is at that time studying physics at MIT, he thinks, or he seems to think, that all fans of science fiction are going to be scientists, are going to be engineers, are going to be interested in the endless extrapolations of contemporary 1930s theories into scientific solutions, posed at this future point. So I think this is 2120 or 2125 where this book is set. It's difficult to know now where the extrapolation of 1930s scientific theories becomes absolute fantasy, other than knowing what in reality happened in the world and didn't. We don't have a fraction of the invention that he gives us in these books. And I'm not against the inventiveness, but I do think the sheer amount that is on offer in the Black Star Passes and the sequels, but I do think that the amount of invention that is thrown at us in the Black Star Passes and in the sequels, Islands of Space and Invaders from the Infinite, is overwhelming, and you become desensitized to it. And when I say the characters of Arcot, Maury and Wade are interchangeable, I really do mean it. When the solution is being proposed, you will not be able to tell which one of the three characters is talking if you had not been told. Now, on the rare occasions they're not talking about solving an issue, you would probably be able to tell which character Wade was, because Wade is initially an antagonist to Maury and Arcot. He very quickly, from being public enemy number one, joins them, and as soon as he does, he falls into that same character type as Maury and Arcot. But as quickly as they find solutions, they implement those solutions even quicker, and that sometimes beggars belief more than the finding the solution in the first place. Again, this slightly takes place in E. Doc Smith's Skylark world, more pronounced in the Lensman stories. But in the Lensman stories, you have the resources of the entire planet being thrown behind these projects. Here, we have some very wealthy individuals. I think Arcot's father and Maury's father are both wealthy industrialists with lots of manufacturing capability at their disposal. But even so, they often have an idea for a new type of spaceship, and within a fortnight they've built it. They've stayed up all night designing it, and they've got their respective fathers to rush these jobs through at the factories. Forget the fact that we've had to create a new metal to do this. But by the time it's been built in that 2 weeks, they've actually figured out that we've invented a whole new way of propulsion. We can now send it faster than light. We'll just retrofit this to the ship. All of this could be excused as a depiction of geniuses working together, as the exponent of a sheer determination. If this narrative flaw was isolated to the scientific solutions, where the first answer is the best answer and can be implemented quickly without setback or hindrance. If this was isolated to just the science, it might not be quite as bad. But they are guilty of the very same hyper-confidence in their own abilities when it comes to the moral decisions that they make. They visit other planets in the first book, and obviously in the sequels that follow. And they have the uncanny knack of, whenever they visit a planet, the first people they meet either are the leaders of that planet or are on a first name basis acquaintance with them. So they get right to the top of the society very, very quickly. Any characteristic which one of the alien race has is more than likely a characteristic shared by the entire race. And whilst this might make for an ease of writing characters, it's also a absolute breeding ground for petty prejudices, of which I think Campbell had more than his fair share. And this is exemplified in how they often come to arrive to help a particular group of people battle against another group of people. They will absolutely take the side of the first people that they meet, and will usually end up in the sort of mindless slaughter. And as the books go on, in increasing scale, violence and numbers of other races. Again, I want to try to find an excuse. I want to find an out for Campbell. We can't look at all that war and genocidal tendencies being the answer in the same light after the Second World War that Campbell is perhaps looking at it before the Second World War. Not that it's any less reprehensible, it's just that he has at this point not had the same experience that we all either experienced or know about after the event. This is written at a time which is still colonial, so it's very difficult as well to put a post-colonial sheen on it in 1934 or whenever this was first published. But it doesn't make it any easier reading. And I think that it is that there is no growth from this that I do have an issue with. This is a first edition copy of The Mightiest Machine from 1947, although the stories that it takes from are far before 1947. And these are the adventures of Munro, and I can't remember the name of the other people that go along with Munro, but I guarantee that they are completely interchangeable with Arcot, Maury and Wade. The characterization is flat. There's nothing discernible from one over the other. The Mightiest Machine falls into a number of the same difficulties. It has the same basic story. I don't think they are as well funded, but these are all heroes of super science who can overcome any problem with nothing more than a spanner and a few valves. They will invent a new method of propulsion, build a ship to order within a few weeks, and test that theory out. And that theory will, in 100% of times of testing, be proven correct. Should they come across an issue that needs another level of thought above that propulsion, another way of thinking about something even more powerful, have a cup of tea, have a cup of coffee rather, think it over for half an hour and invent faster than light travel and get that sorted by tea time. To make that comparison to Doc Smith again, in the Skylark of Space, they sort of have the same kind of approach, but it's slightly more tempered. Things take slightly longer to achieve. Financial backing has to be sought out from parties outside of your own family. And I think that perhaps in the Smith stories things don't get solved as quickly because there is distraction in Smith's world with the other half of the human race, ladies. There are no ladies in Campbell's books. There is no love interest. There is no speaking part for any female character on any of the other planets that they visit. Again, I think this is Campbell writing to what he thinks is his intended audience. If you're going to be an engineer in the 1930s, you're not going to be a woman. If you're going to be a scientist in the 1930s, it's vastly unlikely you're going to be a woman. I suppose that given their absence, we are at the very least spared early Campbell's attempts to write women characters. At best, I think they would be seen as interchangeable with the male characters. At worst, I could imagine it being a lot worse. But given how much we experienced Campbell's characters as being very superficial, in the sequel to The Black Star Passes, it becomes surprising somewhat that they are able to learn how to communicate telepathically. But they do. They are on a space voyage, somewhere where I can't quite remember, and to pass the time they are playing chess and discover that they are so damn smart now that they can actually communicate telepathically. This does allow Campbell to get around the issue of encountering alien races, because the telepathic communication, despite some problems a few problems in translation, is a fairly reliable way of speaking with people who do not share your language. I don't have so much of an issue with this. It, I suppose, is a little bit of an antecedent to what comes later in the psi boom. That's PSI of the 1950s. It's a shame, because I really want to be able to enjoy these stories more. And I am going to persevere, because I'm at the moment halfway through Invaders from the Infinite, which is the third of the Arcot, Maury and Wade. I want to get over that line. But there's no tension. There's no peril. There's no drama. The first answer is always the correct answer. Inductive reasoning can be engaged by knowing one fact about a people, about an entirely new alien race, and solving all their problems for them on that basis. These characters would be completely arrogant were it not for the fact that arrogance would be a characteristic you could apply to them. And it's all the more frustrating because there are writings from Campbell which I do like. Other people in Rocket Summer have already spoken about Who Goes There, the short story that becomes The Thing from Another World, which becomes The Thing, which becomes the other remake of The Thing. So, it's a fantastic story. And I also want to point out a book which I think comes later. I think it's written in the 1950s. So after the Heroes of Super Science phase, and before Campbell loses himself in psyops and Dianetics. And that is a short novel called The Moon is Hell. And I think this is a really good book. It's written as, I want to say a diary. It's like a combination between a diary and an actual sort of technical log of this lunar station. Both Who Goes There and The Moon is Hell share a lack of geniuses and a lack of resources. It's not to say there aren't some smart people involved in both these stories, but they are not going to know the answer to everything straight away. They do not have the resources afforded to the characters in the Black Star Passes trilogy or The Mightiest Machine. They have no freedom. They are isolated, they are trapped. Who Goes There? They are in the Antarctic. In The Moon is Hell, an expedition which seems to be very lightly provisioned, goes to the moon. Things go wrong as soon as they land. They are unable to leave. Isolated and trapped, the situation is given that impetus, is given that scenario of peril, is given the drama. In Who Goes Where, they are surrounded by a frozen wasteland. In The Moon is Hell, they are surrounded by a lunar wasteland. There's nothing to aid them. and it forces Campbell to write to the story rather than writing the characters out of a problem. And I think maybe that's the issue I have with both the Black Star Passes trilogy and The Mightiest Machine. Not that there isn't an imagination there, is that it's given completely free rein. If you can travel faster than light with infinite resources and absolute technical skill, then you can do whatever you want, and it becomes picaresque in all the wrong ways. It becomes just a succession of ideas and archetypes thrown against the wall. Human and alien life in these books is cheap. There is death and destruction without a second thought. There are some very questionable judgments made about how to conduct yourself in conflict, which aren't given a second thought. In Who Goes There, in The Moon is Hell, we have a limited amount of people available. Life is suddenly very precious. In Who Goes There, the antagonist is amongst them. It is breeding paranoia. It will kill. In The Moon is Hell, there is no character antagonist. They are against the elements or the lack of elements. Their enemies are starvation. Starvation from food, water and air. They have to be ingenious, but that ingenuity is not an innate characteristic glibly tossed off as it is in The Mightiest Machine or the Dark Star Passes. It is something that is born of absolute necessity. There will be consequences, real and immediate, if things go wrong. And not everything goes right, which is, again, a difference from those earlier novels. But by the time The Moon is Hell is written, Campbell's career as writer is over. He's at this point been the editor of Astounding Science Fiction for I think 13, 14 years by this point. It's about to become Analog magazine. I think this now becomes the thing that takes all his time up. I don't know whether that's a shame or not, because if he'd written another book as good as The Moon is Hell, I'd be, annoyed that he hadn't written it. If he had come up with something else in the mould of The Mightiest Machine, I don't think I would have read it. So it's annoying on a couple of fronts. It's annoying because I don't like being negative in videos, but you have to be honest. And what comes across as somewhat quaint and charming in The Sky Like a Space, what is all excitement and bombast in the Lensman series from E. Dogsmith, becomes, in Campbell's hands, just a little boring, just a little flat. I think in conclusion that I just take it back to what I said at the beginning. I want a little more fiction and a little less science. I like science fiction, but I think we have to place equal weight on both the words of the title of that genre. And this isn't to say that I don't think some sort of heroes of super science, super capable people couldn't be important in some cases, even in real life. For example, if roadworks are started right outside my house just as I'm finishing recording the video, it'd be really good if that could all be completed in a super short amount of time. But reality is a little more complicated and annoying than John Campbell would perhaps like to find it. But there you have it. You can't be super enthusiastic about everything, and I would still urge anyone to read The Moon is Hell. I think that's an excellent book, and of course, who goes there, but you should all know about that already. So until next time, and hopefully with more positive vibes, bye.